The biggest football tournament in history kicked off on June 11, 2026. 80,000 fans packed into the legendary Estadio Azteca in Mexico City to watch the host nation beat South Africa 2-0 in a spectacular opening ceremony. Fireworks, history, emotion, everything you'd expect from a World Cup that had been built up for years as the most ambitious, the most expansive, the most watched tournament the sport had ever seen. And then, just a few hours later, the second match began. South Korea versus Czechia at Estadio Akron in Guadalajara, Group A. The World Cup was barely half a day old, and as the cameras panned across the stadium, viewers watching at home immediately noticed something that FIFA had spent months and millions of dollars trying to prevent: empty seats. Rows of them, red seats, unoccupied, sitting right in the center of the stand opposite the main broadcast camera. The hospitality sections, the premium areas, the corporate boxes, the VIP packages that reportedly cost upwards of $5,000 per person, visibly hollow. FIFA officially reported 44,985 fans attended the match at a stadium with a tournament capacity of 45,664. According to those numbers, barely 679 seats should have been empty. But what millions of people saw on their screens told a very different story. So what is really going on here, and is this a sign of something much bigger that could define this entire tournament? Let's go back to where this all started. When the United States, Canada, and Mexico won the right to co-host the 2026 World Cup, the bid made a clear promise to fans: accessible, affordable, a celebration of football that would bring the world together across 3 nations in 16 host cities. The 2026 edition was always going to be historic in scale. For the first time ever, 48 teams would compete in 104 matches, up from 64 in every previous modern tournament. The final would be played at the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey on July 19th, and the opening match would be held at the Azteca, the first stadium in history to host a World Cup opening game 3 times. On paper, this was everything football fans had dreamed of. Then, the tickets went on sale. When the original bid was submitted, organizers had promised fans that a seat at the final would cost a maximum of around $1,550. But by April 2026, the cheapest standard final ticket had reached $5,785. The most expensive seats hit $10,990 and later climbed even higher. Just 2 days before the tournament began, reports emerged of 180,000 unsold tickets still listed across FIFA's official resale platforms. That number is staggering: 180,000 unsold tickets for the biggest sporting event on Earth. FIFA had priced group stage tickets starting at $140, but regular seats for the final were listed up to $8,680, with hospitality seats reaching $72,200. 4 years ago at the Qatar World Cup, the price range ran from $69 to $1,607. The jump isn't incremental, it's a different tournament financially, and fans across the world have felt it. Football Supporters Europe and consumer group Euroconsumers formally filed a complaint with the European Commission, accusing FIFA of abusing its monopoly position over ticket sales. FIFA holds a monopoly over ticket sales for the 2026 World Cup and has used that power to impose conditions on fans that would never be acceptable in a competitive market, the group stated. This wasn't fringe criticism. This was an organized, formal legal challenge, and it arrived before a single ball was kicked. Now, here's where things get really interesting and a bit contradictory. FIFA claimed to have received 500 million booking requests for the tournament. 500 million! If that figure is accurate, demand for World Cup tickets was unprecedented. And yet, as the tournament prepared to begin, nearly 180,000 seats were still available. How do you reconcile those two things? The answer lies in how FIFA structured its pricing model. FIFA adopted a dynamic pricing approach, which moves resale into a controlled official market that can push out scalpers, but also lets FIFA capture economic value that scalpers would have otherwise taken. However, experts noted that a ticket is essentially a perishable good. Once the match starts, an unsold seat has zero value. Fans willing to be flexible might find real bargains close to kickoff as resellers cut prices rather than hold an asset that expires. But that logic doesn't comfort the fan in Seoul who saved for 2 years to attend their nation's World Cup match, only to find the cheapest available ticket on the official platform was still worth more than a month's average salary. At the start of June, FIFA quietly slashed prices across all 104 matches and returned 70% of its block-booked hotel rooms due to low demand, a last-minute change of tactics that many observers saw as an attempt to save face and avoid the one image FIFA feared most: empty stadiums on global television. The price cut was significant, but it came late, and for a great many fans, it came too late. FIFA also introduced a new supporter entry tier, offering a limited number of $60 tickets for each of the 104 matches, including the final. However, those discounted seats were allocated through national associations, and fan groups argued the concession had little practical effect. The discounted seats were reportedly gone before the general sale even began. So you had two realities existing at the same time: a FIFA that was publicly claiming the tournament was sold out and demand was record-breaking, and a FIFA that was quietly cutting hotel contracts, slashing resale prices, and scrambling to prevent the optics of empty stadiums. Then the second match kicked off, and the cameras saw what they saw. Now let's talk about South Korea versus Czechia specifically, because this match has become the clearest symbol of the problem. Czechia only qualified for this World Cup on March 31, 2026, barely 10 weeks before the tournament began. They beat Denmark on penalties in Prague after a 2-2 draw through extra time, advancing to their first World Cup in 20 years in the most dramatic fashion possible. Czech fans had less than 3 months to organize travel, book accommodation, and secure tickets for matches played across North America. And here's the reality of that situation. Getting from Prague to Guadalajara, Mexico isn't a weekend trip. It's a transatlantic flight, a connection, significant expense, and then you're navigating a foreign city in a country where logistical challenges are part of the experience. For ordinary fans on ordinary budgets, the window was simply too short and the costs too high. The empty seats during the South Korea versus Czechia match were particularly noticeable in the hospitality areas, where packages reportedly cost over $5,000 per person. That's precisely where the largest visible gaps appeared. Several fans directly blamed FIFA's pricing model, with one social media user writing that it was no surprise seats were empty after prices had been driven to such levels. Another described the stands as crazy to look at right from the start of the tournament. And then came the detail that lit the internet on fire. FIFA officially reported 44,985 fans in attendance at a stadium with a tournament capacity of 45,664, suggesting just 679 empty seats. But the visual evidence broadcast to a global audience showed something dramatically different, particularly in corporate and hospitality sections. That contradiction between official numbers and visible reality is what has driven this story into a much larger conversation. Politicians in New York and New Jersey have launched a formal investigation into allegations that FIFA confused fans and inflated prices. Complaints center on a lack of clarity for fans navigating online queuing systems, with many waiting hours only to discover the eventual ticket price once they reached the front, with no guarantee they'd even get the seat they wanted. This is no longer just fans venting on social media. This is government-level scrutiny of a global sporting body's business practices, right in the middle of the tournament. It's worth stepping back here, because empty seats at the World Cup are not a new phenomenon. FIFA has faced this before. At the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, a number of group stage matches featured visible blocks of empty seats. After thousands of seats sat visibly empty for the Greece versus South Korea match, FIFA launched a probe into transportation issues. At the time, FIFA blamed the problem on corporate and government ticket holders as well as overseas fans, not attending matches despite having purchased or received seats. Sound familiar? Brazil 2014 had similar reports. Fans priced out, sponsor tickets not used, seats sitting empty in stadiums filled at less than capacity because the people who bought the tickets either couldn't make the journey or simply chose not to show up. What makes 2026 different is the scale of the tournament and the scale of the pricing gap. Football Supporters Europe pointed out that the lowest-priced final tickets currently available to the public are more than 7 times higher than the cheapest tickets to the 2022 World Cup final. The projected cost for one person to attend 8 World Cup matches runs from £5,225 at the lowest tier up to £12,350 for premium seats, compared to a cost of £1,466 to £3,914 for the equivalent at the previous tournament. 7 times. That's not inflation. That's a completely different financial philosophy about who the World Cup is for. And the Club World Cup played in the United States just last year as a direct dress rehearsal for this tournament offered a stark warning that was apparently not heeded. More than 400,000 seats were left empty during the opening round of Club World Cup group matches, with stadiums averaging just 56.8% capacity. Half of the first 16 matches saw attendance figures below 50% of stadium capacity. The warning signs were there, clearly visible, widely reported, extensively discussed, and yet here we are on day one of the World Cup itself, watching the same story play out again. Think about what this means for the players, for the teams, for the fans who did make the trip. South Korea came from behind against Czechia to win 2-1 in a genuinely exciting match. Son Heung-min and his teammates put on a performance worth celebrating. But the atmosphere in that stadium, the energy that players feed off, the noise that turns a football match into an event, was diminished, not destroyed, but diminished. Imagine being a Czech fan who did make the journey, who spent thousands to be there, who watched their newly qualified side play their first World Cup match in 20 years in a stadium that visually, clearly wasn't full, even as FIFA reported near-capacity attendance. And imagine being a South Korean supporter watching at home in Seoul, where the passion for this national team is genuine and deep, knowing that the atmosphere for your team's opening match was affected not by lack of interest, but by price points that put attendance beyond reach for most of the world's fans. Football's atmosphere is generated by ordinary supporters, the ones who paint their faces, who travel in groups, who sing for 90 minutes regardless of the score. As one expert put it, if the fans who create the atmosphere feel excluded, the product itself becomes less valuable in a broader sense. That's the real cost here. It's not just optics, it's the soul of what makes football football. So where does this go from here? What happens in the next 5 weeks? The optimistic scenario is that the matches involving the biggest fan bases and the highest-profile nations fill their stadiums. USA versus Paraguay kicks off on June 12th. Brazil, Argentina, England, France, they're all coming. And those matches, in the cities that support them, will very likely be packed. The concern is for the smaller group stage games, the ones involving teams whose fans face long travel distances, short qualification windows, and brutal ticket prices. Czechia will play again. South Africa, who lost the opening match 2-0 to Mexico, still have 2 more group games. These are the matches where the empty seat problem could persist. FIFA had expected to raise more than $3 billion from ticket and hospitality sales during this tournament, more than 3 times higher than the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. With the median resale price having dropped by 20% over recent weeks, and with resellers potentially facing losses given FIFA's 26% resale fee, those revenue projections are under real pressure. FIFA will also be watching closely whether the attention and controversy around the South Korea-Czechia match prompts more scrutiny of its official attendance figures going forward. If independent counts begin to diverge consistently from official numbers, that creates a credibility problem that goes well beyond ticketing. Gianni Infantino, asked to defend the pricing model on the eve of the tournament, told fans to essentially calm down. His argument was that lower prices would simply push tickets into secondary markets and black market activity, benefiting scalpers rather than football. That argument has a logic to it, but it doesn't address the fundamental question: if the seats are empty, was the pricing strategy actually successful? The irony of a sold-out tournament with visible empty seats is one FIFA will be living with for the entire group stage, and possibly beyond. The 2026 World Cup has the potential to be extraordinary. The football, starting even on day one, has been genuinely compelling. South Korea's comeback, Mexico's opening victory in front of 80,000 roaring fans at the Azteca. This tournament has the ingredients for something special. But the empty seats at Estadio Akron on the very second match of the tournament sent a message that no amount of official attendance figures can entirely undo. This is what happens when access to the world's most beloved sport becomes the preserve of those who can afford corporate hospitality packages costing more than some people's annual income. Football belongs to everyone. That's not just a slogan, it's the reason the game has billions of fans. It's why an African boy kicking a ball in a dusty yard and a Korean girl watching her team in a stadium 30 rows up share the same love for something that transcends wealth, nationality, and circumstance. When the seats are empty, something has gone wrong, not with the game, with the decisions made around it. Is this a one-day story, or is it the defining image of a tournament that stretched too far, charged too much, and learned too little from its own warnings?